Welcome back to Chapter Chats. In this episode, we're unpacking Chapter 14 of Dr. Chuck Hodell's ISD from the Ground Up, a no-nonsense approach to instructional design. This chapter introduces us to the concept of criticality and explores the content mastery continuum and the idea of a mastery tipping point. So let's get started. I've got some questions for you, Chuck. The first one being, you introduce criticality as a way to gauge how essential content is to learning outcomes. How can designers use this to avoid overwhelming learners with too much content?
Well, too much, yeah, sometimes, too little sometimes, completely using things over and over again and calling it something else. I mean, any way that people can add too much to a lesson, they have figured out how to do it. And what criticality does, it's used in a lot of fields. I brought it to instructional design because I was working on projects where there was an incredible amount of content already existing in course. And people said, I can't take 12 weeks with these folks on site. I need 2 weeks or I need 3 weeks. And so I adapted the principles of criticality into instructional design. And essentially what you do is you assign values to each objective. So how often will they use this? How important is it? You can look in the chapter, you can see it's kind of complicated. There's a bit of math, but if you just use it in the terms of, okay, this is an idea for me to have in the back of my head about how to make sure I have the right content, not too much or too little, then you want to think about criticality. And I know that people are using this. It takes a little bit of time, but if you have a large project that's really upscale, then this is something that can save you a tremendous amount of time, but it also produces a product that's efficient and you don't waste anybody's time.
The content mastery continuum provides a visual way to map content importance. So can you walk us through how this tool helps designers make decisions during design or revision?
Yeah, it's another one of those advanced concepts in Chapter 14. And there are a lot of them in this one, but this is probably more for people that have been doing this for a while, just looking for different ways to think about things. But for new designers, this is important too, because it gets us in the mindset of, okay, not every one of my learners is at the same place with content mastery. They don't come in at the same place. I mean, gosh knows from your experience and mine that populations can be incredibly varied. So what I did is I took a little bit of Bloom and a little bit of Maslow, and I came up with this idea that all of us on content knowledge and mastery are on a continuum from knowing nothing to essentially knowing what we need to know, whether it's an expert or whatever you want to tag that as. So if you look at this from an instructional design perspective, what we're saying is when you do analysis, look at your population and find out where they are on this continuum. And this will tell you what you need to have for work ahead of time, for population members that aren't up to speed where you need them to be on prerequisites. And it also tells you if you're going too far, they really don't need to know all this. This is where they need to be in terms of mastery. They don't need to be experts. They just need to be able to use something. So if you let this sink in a little bit, what you're going to find is going to help you very quickly figure out where your populations are.
You describe the mastery tipping point as the moment when mastery clicks. What are some ways that designers can help learners reach this tipping point more effectively?
Yeah, I mean, that's a age-old question in instructional design is, where's your population in implementation? How do you know when they have reached mastery, are approaching mastery, or struggling, all of these things? And the tipping point essentially is a philosophical approach to this, which I came up with, which tells us, okay, I know at this point in my lesson, by observation or however else I'll judge this, that I now have the majority of my population past the point of mastery where I've asked them to be and what I've designed for them to be at. So the tipping point is this notion that, yeah, they're there. And I should be able to observe this. I should be able to measure this. And once you get there, you don't need to go any farther because you've already defined what your courseware is about, what you want people to be able to show mastery in, et cetera. So it's one of these higher end instructional design skills that kind of put in the back of your head. And when you need it, you'll know it, believe me.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned that criticality analysis can help during evaluations as well. How have you used it in practice to diagnose issues in underperforming courses?
Yeah. So in criticality, what you're going to find is there's a point at which people just don't get on board. There's a point at which this is too much stuff, or you need to break it up into things that we always call modules or lessons. Well, philosophically we call them chunks or packets, but criticality gets you to that point. And as an example in criticality, I once had a group come to me and they had a 12-week course, in-residence course. And this was related to the government. I won't say what because it doesn't matter. But they had 12 weeks and they didn't have a lot of budget anymore. So they couldn't keep people on site for 12 weeks. And there was no option for doing online. It just wouldn't work for them. So what we did is we sat down for a week and went through every single objective of this 12-week program. And the one thing we discovered, which I thought was fascinating, was the amount of redundancy. They were teaching the same things over and over and calling it something else. So we actually took this 12 weeks and narrowed it down to 2 weeks in residence. And they actually said it went better because it was so efficient. People weren't bored. People weren't wondering why we were doing this again and all the other things that go on. So if you look at this in terms of a way for instructional designers to think about this, and you look at criticality and you look at the tipping point and all the other things that are in this chapter, these are higher order instructional design skills that are going to help you not only create, but also define and evaluate your product in a light that goes beyond just, well, I think that works. And this is where we get into the science of instructional design. This is science. This is stuff that we have researched and we can show works, and here's how you use it in real life.
My last question, for a designer new to these ideas, what's the easiest starting point to begin applying criticality and mastery thinking to their work?
Well, I think you really have to be tough when you're doing your analysis. You've got to look through and see what's fluff, what's smoke, what's mirrors, and what really contributes to getting your learning population to mastery. And if you have a critical eye and you're working with a team that also has a critical eye and is willing to look at things from a little different perspective, what you're going to find is some of the stuff is just going to jump out at you. There's no reason why we have to teach this in this course. If we can either set it up as a prerequisite, we can have pre-learning options, we can have post-learning options. What is the real heart and soul of what your content is telling you? Needs to be here and needs to be evaluated for mastery. And once you start thinking about it and you put yourself in a little bit different mindset, it all pops out at you. It becomes so obvious. And from then forward, then you're going to have this state of mind about looking at these things in a different way.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing your insights as always, Chuck. It's always a pleasure to listen to your insights. And thanks everyone for tuning into this chapter chat. We will see you in the next one.